The security room hummed with the low electric pulse of 12 monitors, their blue-white light casting everything in cold silence. Nicholas Castellano stood motionless before them, his hands braced on the console, shoulders broad and unyielding beneath a black cashmere coat that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He was tall, built like a man forged from concrete and will, with dark hair silvered at the temples and eyes the color of storm water, eyes that had watched empires crumble and men beg for mercy. A scar ran from his left eye to his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of the violence that had made him what he was. It was 2:47 in the morning. On monitor 7, Aria Harper moved through the servants' corridor, her small frame barely visible in the darkness. She wore a faded gray hoodie, the kind sold at discount stores for $9, and she carried a worn canvas bag clutched against her ribs like it contained something fragile, something precious. Her breath came in small clouds in the October cold as she glanced over her shoulder. Once. Twice. Then she was gone, moving toward the servants' entrance like a ghost dissolving into fog. Nicholas did not move. His jaw clenched so tight his men could see the muscle working beneath his skin. Behind him stood Rocco, his lieutenant of 12 years, 6'3" and built like the enforcer he was. Rocco's dark eyes reflected the monitor light as he watched his boss watching the nanny disappear into the night. This was the 14th time in 21 days. Rocco had been counting. "Boss," Rocco said, his voice careful, measured. "She knows too much about our operations." She was in the study during the Delgado meeting. She saw the... "I know what she saw," Nicholas said, each word a stone dropped into still water. His hand rested on the gun at his hip, fingers touching the cold metal like it was a prayer. "I was bleeding on my study floor, and she pressed her hand to my wound instead of running. I thought that meant something. I thought it meant she understood loyalty." Rocco shifted his weight. In 15 years of working for Nicholas Castellano, he had learned to read the dangerous quiet that descended when his boss was thinking about betrayal. This was that quiet. This was the moment before violence. "What do you want us to do?" Rocco asked. The monitors showed different angles of the property, the marble foyer where Italian sculptures stood like silent judges, the curved staircase where little Emma Whitfield slept upstairs in her four-poster bed, the kitchen where Aria prepared breakfast every morning at 6 o'clock, her hands moving with the efficiency of someone who had learned to be invisible. That was who she was supposed to be, the invisible nanny, the hired help, the woman who wore the same 3 cardigans on rotation and slept in a converted closet barely larger than a pantry. But invisible women did not sneak out of mansions at 2 in the morning with bags. On monitor 2, the camera caught her exiting through the north gate. The October wind was brutal, the kind of cold that came down from the mountains and stripped everything bare. She walked fast, her shoulders hunched, breath visible in the darkness. The canvas bag swung at her hip. The resolution was good enough to see her lips moving. She was counting something, or praying, or both. Nicholas traced her path on the monitors as she moved deeper into the warehouse district. Monitor 3. Monitor 4. Her figure getting smaller, the darkness getting larger. "Follow her," he said quietly. "But do not let her know. I want to understand what she is doing before we decide what she deserves." Rocco nodded and turned to leave, but Nicholas raised one hand. His voice came out like venom, like a blade wrapped in ice. "And Rocco, if she is meeting someone, if she is selling information to the Delgados or anyone else, I want to know the moment you discover it. Because this is the only warning the universe gives. After that..." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Rocco left without another word. Nicholas remained standing before the monitors, watching the last camera feed showing the empty warehouse district, empty street, empty night. Somewhere out there, Aria Harper was moving through the October cold toward something, or toward someone. Somewhere out there, the woman he had brought into his home to care for his daughter was committing an act of betrayal that would cost her everything. He did not know yet that he was wrong. He did not know yet that Aria Harper was not his enemy, that she was fighting a war he could not yet see, and that his misunderstanding would nearly cost both of them everything. He did not know that in 48 hours, his entire understanding of loyalty and betrayal would be shattered like glass against marble. All he knew was the cold certainty in his chest, the feeling that something had shifted in the darkness, and that whatever came next would change the structure of his empire forever. The monitors glowed. The machines hummed. And in the silence, a dangerous man stood alone, preparing for a war he did not yet understand. If this story is speaking to your heart, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you do not miss what comes tomorrow. Every comment you leave fuels our ability to bring you more stories like this one. Now let us go back to the beginning. Let us go back to 3 weeks ago, to the night when everything changed for Aria Harper. The night when the prayer card fell out of her pocket and changed the course of both their lives. Rewind. 21 days earlier. The Whitfield mansion kitchen was all white marble and stainless steel, the kind of space that seemed designed to make ordinary people feel very small. Aria Harper stood at the sink at 11 o'clock at night, her hands in water so hot it turned her skin red. She had been awake since 5 that morning. She would be awake until 5 tomorrow morning. This was the rhythm of her life, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, in a house where she was less visible than the furniture. She was 28 years old and looked 40. Her hair was a dull brown, pulled back so tight it gave her headaches, and her eyes were the color of concrete, grey, tired, empty of hope. Her hands were calloused from work, the skin cracked and rough, and there was a thin scar running down her left wrist that she always kept covered by her watch, a watch that did not work anymore. She wore a black uniform that Mrs. Whitfield provided, polyester and cheap cotton, with a white apron tied at her waist. The apron had a stain on it that would not come out, something tomato-based and permanent. Little Emma Whitfield was asleep upstairs, 8 years old, with blonde hair like corn silk and eyes the color of sapphires. Emma was the only part of this house that felt real to Aria. The only part that felt like family. The dishes piled in the sink seemed endless. Mrs. Diana Whitfield had hosted a dinner party, 12 people, 3 courses, wines imported from Tuscany, and Aria had spent the entire evening serving and cleaning, appearing and disappearing like a carefully trained ghost. She had not eaten. The leftover food in the garbage disposal seemed obscene when she had exactly $78 to her name. $78. In 3 days, the foreclosure notice on her own house would become official. $125,000 she owed on a property that was never supposed to be hers in the first place, inherited from a mother she had barely known, with legal debts attached like anchors. The house was slipping away, and she had no power to stop it. The prayer card was in her pocket, worn soft from touching it 1,000 times. She pulled her hands from the water and dried them on her apron. Her shift was not over. Mrs. Whitfield had requested that she prepare breakfast for 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, which meant Aria would have 6 hours to sleep if she fell asleep immediately, and her converted closet bedroom was so cold in October that sleep was difficult. Her converted closet. That was where she lived, 200 square feet of converted space in the servants' wing, with a single window that faced the alley. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out the prayer card. It was old, printed on thin cardboard, the edges soft and frayed from decades of handling. On one side was an image of Mary, Mother of God, with light radiating from her open palms. On the other side, words, "Prayer is the courage to believe when everything else demands you break." Her grandmother had given her this card in 1997, before she disappeared. Aria had kept it through the death of her mother, through 3 abusive relationships, through the loss of her house and her savings and her ability to believe that life was anything other than a series of endless disappointments. She kept the prayer card because it was the last tangible thing that proved her grandmother had existed, had loved her, had believed she would survive. The kitchen suddenly felt very small. She could hear the sound of the mansion settling around her, the refrigerator humming, the distant tick of an expensive clock somewhere in the main house. Somewhere above her, Mrs. Whitfield was probably reviewing her calendar, planning tomorrow, organizing her life with the kind of precision that only money allowed. And somewhere in a bedroom upstairs, little Emma slept with her nightlight shaped like a star, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, unconscious of the fact that the woman who tucked her in each night had nowhere to go. The prayer card bent slightly in her trembling fingers. She had to do something. In 3 days, the bank would take the house. In 3 days, she would be homeless. Her job at the Whitfield mansion paid $1,500 a month, and most of that went to the mortgage payment she could not afford. She had tried to get a second job, but no one would hire her for evening shifts when she was already working 14 hours a day. She had tried to borrow money, but the banks had laughed. She had tried to ask Mrs. Whitfield for an advance, but Mrs. Whitfield had looked at her with the kind of contempt usually reserved for insects. There was one place she had not tried yet. It was not a good option. It was not a legal option. But it was an option, and options were becoming scarce. She placed the prayer card back in her pocket, close to her heart, where it pressed against her ribs like a talisman. Then she picked up her phone, a cheap smartphone that cost $30, and opened the contacts. One number. That was all. One number given to her by a woman named Christine who had worked as a maid in this same house 2 years ago before disappearing. She stared at the number for 5 minutes before she pressed it. The voice that answered was male, old, and rough as gravel. "Yeah? I was told to call this number," Aria said quietly. "By Christine. She said if I needed help, if I needed money, fast, that someone here could help." The silence on the line lasted long enough for her to hear her own breathing, fast and shallow and terrified. "Name," the voice said. "Aria. Aria Harper." "Who sent you?" "Christine. I do not know her last name. She worked here 2 years ago as a maid. She said that if anyone was ever desperate enough, they should call this number." Another silence. "Then, you sound desperate." "I am," she said, and the words came out broken. "I am desperate. I have nowhere to go. I have 3 days. I have $78. I will do anything. I will work anything. I just need to stay alive long enough to figure out how to survive." The man on the other end of the line laughed. It was not a kind laugh. "Christine was stupid," he said. "But you sound smart. You sound like someone who understands what she is asking. Come to the warehouse on 5th and Morrison. 10 o'clock tomorrow night. Come alone. Come with no phone, no recording device, no wire. Come ready to work. Come ready to do things that honest people do not do." The line went dead. Aria stood in the kitchen of the Whitfield mansion, in her cheap polyester uniform, in her empty house that was already being taken from her, and made a choice that would change everything. She would go to the warehouse. She would meet Douglas Hale. She would volunteer to enter a world she did not understand, to save a house that was never supposed to be hers, and in doing so, she would attract the attention of a man who ruled Las Vegas from a marble mansion on a hill, a man who had built his entire empire on the principle that he protected the invisible, the forgotten, the children abandoned by the world. She did not know it yet. She did not know that in 14 hours, she would come face to face with a darkness that made her own struggles look like shadows. She did not know that in 21 days, a mafia boss would be watching her on security cameras, believing her a traitor. She did not know that the prayer card in her pocket, worn soft from her grandmother's hands and her own desperate faith, would become a symbol of the only thing that could save her, not money, not power, not the kind of loyalty that violence demanded. Just faith that someone, somewhere, would choose to stay. She picked up her phone and set an alarm for 9:30 p.m. the next day. Then she turned off all the lights, locked the mansion in silence, and climbed the stairs to her small dark room, where she lay awake counting the hours until her life would be changed forever. 3 weeks before Aria Harper would kneel beside a bleeding man in a marble study, she sat in a converted closet that the Whitfield family called her bedroom, counting 78 crumpled dollars by the light of a single yellow lamp. The bills lay spread across a threadbare blanket like evidence of a crime: 1s, 5s, a 10, 3 20s, the rest wrinkled singles she had collected in tips over 2 months of double shifts at the diner on Fremont Street. Outside her window, Las Vegas glittered with a cruel kind of brightness, millions of lights burning for people who had money to lose. Inside her closet, there was only yellow lamplight and the sound of her own breathing, shallow and measured, as if the room itself did not have enough air for desperation this thick. The foreclosure notice sat unopened on her pillow. She knew what it said. She had already calculated the numbers in her head 1,000 times. $125,000. 3 days remaining. The house belonged to her grandmother, technically, though by the time the mortgage company finished with their paperwork and their interest and their penalties, the house would belong to the bank instead, and Aria would belong to nothing at all. She picked up the prayer card from her nightstand, worn soft from her grandmother's hands and her own. The face of St. Jude faded from how many times she had held it, how many times she had whispered to a saint who was supposed to help people in impossible situations. But not to Emma. The Whitfield family occupied the second and third floors of a mansion that belonged to someone else entirely, a businessman they spoke of with careful respect and careful distance. Diana Whitfield was a sharp-edged woman of 52, blonde hair always perfect, always perfectly angry at something. Her husband traveled constantly. Emma was 6 years old, golden curled, gap-toothed when she smiled, and she loved Aria in the way that small children love without calculation, completely and without wondering whether Aria deserved it. Every morning at 5, Aria made Emma's breakfast while Emma sat at the kitchen counter in her pajamas, swinging her legs that did not touch the floor, asking 1,000 questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Why do birds have wings? Why do you look sad when you think nobody is watching? This last question, asked one Tuesday morning while Emma colored at the table with crayons that probably cost more than Aria's entire paycheck, landed in Aria's chest like a knife. She had not known Emma was watching. The daily routine was relentless in its ordinariness. Wake at 4:45. Make coffee, not for herself, she could not afford to drink coffee, make it for Diana, who drank it black and never said thank you. Pack Emma's lunch, sandwich, apple, crackers, juice box that Emma would trade away at school because she was kind and did not understand that some children had more lunches than she would ever have. Drive Emma to Riverside Academy at 7:30, a private school where Emma was one of the few children whose mother was not a surgeon or a lawyer or a woman married to a man with a private jet. Return to the mansion. Clean, because Diana had exacting standards about cleanliness. The house was already clean, but Diana saw dust where there was none, disorder where everything was arranged. At 3 o'clock, pick Emma up from school. Help with homework. Emma was learning to read, and she read to Aria with intense concentration, sounding out words, asking what they meant. Dinner at 6, which Aria prepared from whatever ingredients were in the Whitfield kitchen. Emma ate what Aria made. Diana ate something else, prepared from a meal plan delivered by a company Aria had never heard of. At 9 o'clock, after Emma was asleep, Aria climbed the stairs to her converted closet and counted money or did not count money, depending on how much courage she had. The converted closet was truly a closet. It was approximately 8 feet by 6 feet. The previous owner of the mansion had used it for storing coats. Now it held a twin bed, a small nightstand, and a lamp. The ceiling was lower on one side, sloping with the roofline. Aria could not stand up completely in one corner. There was no window except a small vent that let in cold air in winter and hot air in summer. She had hung a curtain rod with a sheet to divide the space, creating a psychological sense of privacy that did not actually exist. The walls were bare except for one photograph, taped carefully in one corner, her grandmother on her wedding day, young and radiant, holding flowers, standing in front of a house. That house. The house that was being taken away. The night of the foreclosure notice was a Tuesday. Aria had worked a split shift at the diner, 5 a.m. to 2 p.m., then 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., with a break in between when she sat in her car and did not eat because she was saving money. She made $52 in tips. Some customers had not tipped at all. One customer had left $1 for a $7 bill and told her to smile more. She had smiled. She had smiled at every table, had refilled water glasses before they were empty, had anticipated needs before customers knew they had them. $52. Combined with the money she had been saving, it brought her total to $78. 3 days to find $125,000. The mathematics was so catastrophic it was almost funny. She almost laughed, sitting in her converted closet, holding her prayer card, knowing she would not sleep. At 11:43 p.m., the sound came from downstairs. shouting. Men's voices, deep and controlled but threaded with aggression, the kind of sound that made the animal part of your brain recognize danger. Aria was still awake, which meant she heard it clearly, the elevator opening, footsteps crossing marble floor, a study door closing but not quite closing, voices rising behind it. She should have stayed in her room. Every instinct that had kept her alive this far told her to stay exactly where she was, to pull her blanket over her head, to pretend she had not heard anything. She was invisible. Invisible people lived longer. Invisible people did not get hurt because no one knew they existed. She climbed out of bed and moved toward the door. The mansion was dark, lit only by security lights that cast everything in shades of gray and shadow. The staircase was marble, cool beneath her bare feet. Above her, a chandelier hung like a frozen explosion of crystal, and for a moment she thought about letting go, about how easy it would be to simply fall upward into all that light. She moved down the staircase instead, one step, another step, her heart in her throat, every step a decision she knew she should not make. The study door was partially open. Through the crack, she could see light, could see movement. The man standing in the center of the study was one she had seen before, always from a distance, always with the kind of deference that suggested power. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, expensive slacks, a body that suggested violence the way a gun suggests it. The simple fact of existence was threat enough. His hair was dark, his eyes were darker, his face was the kind of face that had been broken once and reassembled into something harder. A thin scar ran from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone, pale white against olive skin. This was Nicholas Castellano. She had seen him only twice before, both times in the hallway, both times he had looked through her as if she did not exist. 3 men stood before him, dressed in suits that were expensive but not as expensive as his, and they were angry about something. One of them moved his hand toward his jacket. Aria saw it happen the way witnesses see catastrophe, in fragments, out of sequence. The hand emerging. The glint of metal. Nicholas moving faster than something that large should move. The sound. 2 sharp sounds that were gunshots, that were violence translated into noise. The men scattering. Nicholas dropping behind the mahogany desk, blood spreading across his white shirt like a flower opening, red blooming from his shoulder. She should have run. She pushed the door open instead and knelt beside him. Blood was warmer than she expected. The wound was on his shoulder, 2 inches above his collarbone, pumping blood with each heartbeat. She pressed her hand against it without thinking, applying pressure the way she had seen done in a movie once, and his cold eyes opened and fixed on her and he said, very quietly, "You should not be here." "You are bleeding," she said. Her voice sounded far away, belonging to someone else. Footsteps erupted from the hallway. 2 men appeared in the doorway with weapons drawn, faces twisted with rage, and they stopped when they saw her, a young woman in cheap pajamas kneeling beside their boss, her hand on his wound, blood soaking into her sleeve. The moment stretched like a rubber band pulled too far. "Get her away from him," the first man said. His name was Rocco. "No," Nicholas said. His voice was quiet but it stopped everything. "She stays." Rocco, a dark-haired, built like a concrete wall, with eyes that had seen things that could not be unseen, moved forward anyway, but Nicholas raised his hand. The gesture was small. The obedience was immediate. "I am fine," Nicholas said to the woman kneeling beside him. "You can let go." She did not let go. She pressed harder. For a moment, no one moved. The second man, Nino, younger, with a copper-colored beard and gold rings on both hands, stepped forward, and Nicholas spoke without looking at him. "Call the doctor. Tell him to come through the side entrance. Tell him discretion, or he does not keep his medical license." Nino left. Rocco remained, watching the nanny with an expression of pure bafflement. In his 15 years of working for Nicholas Castellano, he had seen the boss order deaths with less concern than a man ordering dinner. He had seen him turn enemies into ghosts. He had never seen him allow someone close enough to touch him. He had certainly never seen him refuse medical assistance from his most trusted lieutenant in favor of a young woman pressing her hand to his wound as if she were the only thing keeping him alive. "What is your name?" Nicholas asked. "Aria," she said. "Aria Harper." "Why did you not run, Aria Harper?" She did not answer. There was no answer. She had made a choice in the dark, on a marble staircase, and the choice had led her here, to blood and danger and the cold eyes of a man who looked at her as if she were a puzzle he was trying to solve. The blood was still coming, soaking through her fingers, and she did not move. When the doctor arrived, a thin man with silver hair and a medical bag, arriving through the side entrance 15 minutes later, asking no questions, Aria finally let go. Nicholas did not thank her. He did not offer her money. He simply watched her retreat from the study, watched her climb the marble staircase back toward her converted closet, watched her disappear into the darkness of a house that was not hers. But what Diana Whitfield did not know, as she slept in her perfectly appointed bedroom 2 floors above, was that she had just witnessed the moment when everything she had planned, everything she had calculated, began to shift. The October cold cut through the warehouse like a blade wrapped in ice. Aria Harper's breath came in shallow clouds as she stood in the darkness, her thin jacket no match for the wind that howled through broken windows. Dead leaves skittered across cracked concrete, and the sound, that dry, brittle whisper, made her skin crawl. Douglas Hale waited inside. 56 years old, silver hair slicked back from a face that had never known mercy. His tailored coat cost more than everything Aria owned. 3 men flanked him, their bodies thick with violence, their eyes dead. One of them smiled at her. She wanted to run. "You need money," Douglas said. His voice was flat, mechanical, like a man discussing the weather. "I need information." These 2 things, they can help each other. Aria's hands trembled at her sides. "I'm a nanny. I don't know anything about Mr. Castellano's business." Douglas circled her slowly, his footsteps deliberate on the concrete. "Then you will learn. Or your grandmother's house is gone by noon tomorrow. You have $78 to your name." "I checked." He pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph. Emma. Her Emma. Crying in a strange room, arms wrapped around herself, mouth open in a scream Aria could not hear but could feel in her own chest like a blade plunging into her heart. Aria's knees buckled. "Please. She's only 6. She has nothing to do with this." 2 weeks, Douglas said. His voice did not change. $125,000. Or she disappears into my network. You will never find her. He stepped closer until she could smell his cologne mixed with something rotten underneath. "Now get out." Aria ran. She vomited in an alley 3 blocks away, her body convulsing, her mind fracturing into 1,000 pieces that would not fit back together. The next morning, she forced herself to move. Diana Whitfield sat in her white living room, pristine and perfect in a designer dress that cost more than Aria's annual salary. Diana reported Emma missing to Nicholas through tears that seemed genuine but were not. "Someone took my baby," she whispered. "Please, Nicholas. You have resources. Help me find her." Nicholas's face became a stone mask. He called Rocco and Nino immediately. "Find the child. Use every contact. I do not care what it costs." Aria watched from the doorway, her heart fracturing. She knew the truth. She could not speak it. Douglas's threat lived in her chest like a second heartbeat. Tell anyone, and Emma dies. Tell no one, and Emma dies anyway in 14 days. That night, alone in her converted closet bedroom, Aria sold her grandmother's jewelry to a pawn shop. $3,200. She worked 3 additional cleaning jobs that week, her hands bleeding, her body aching. $800 more. She now had $4,000 against a mountain of $125,000. She was drowning. Diana found her crying in the laundry room on the 7th day. The older woman's hand landed on her shoulder with the weight of a curse. "Any news on Emma?" Aria could not speak. The lie would suffocate her. Diana's smile was ice. I know how difficult this is for you. You loved her like your own child. Past tense. Loved. As if Emma was already dead. Diana continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than any shout. I might be able to help with your foreclosure after all. My accountant found some discretionary funds. $125,000. Exactly what you need. Aria looked up, confusion drowning out fear for just a moment. But, Diana said, you must stay silent about Emma's disappearance. No police. No Nicholas. No one. And the money is yours. Diana's fingers tightened on Aria's shoulder. Can you do that for me? The trap had closed. Aria understood then, in that moment, with perfect terrible clarity. Diana had orchestrated all of it. The debt, the desperation, the kidnapping, all of it was Diana's design, her calculated demolition of Aria's life to buy her silence while her daughter disappeared. Emma was not a missing child. Emma was a bargaining chip in Diana's game. Emma was inconvenient. Why would you do this to your own daughter? Aria's voice was barely a whisper, shattered like glass. Diana's mask slipped. For 1 second, her face revealed nothing but contempt. Because she was in my way. Now she is useful. Meanwhile, 3 miles away in a penthouse office, Nicholas Castellano watched security camera footage on a screen that glowed like a window into hell. Aria. Leaving the mansion at 10 p.m. At midnight. Arriving at the warehouse district. Meeting with a man Nicholas recognized immediately, Douglas Hale, a ghost he thought he had buried 5 years ago. Now Hale appeared on the screen, handing Aria an envelope. Cash. Aria took it. To Nicholas, the message was clear as blood on white marble, she was selling him out. Rocco stood beside him, 15 years of loyalty written into the lines of his face. Want me to handle it? Nicholas's hand curled into a fist. He remembered her pressing against his wound, refusing money, asking only about Emma. He remembered her eyes, the color of autumn leaves, burning with something that looked like purpose. But he also remembered his childhood. His father's fists. The men who smiled before they betrayed. The lesson learned in poverty and pain, trust no one, or die trusting them. Not yet, Nicholas said. His voice was cold and solid like an oath carved in stone. Follow her. I want to know what she is selling and to whom. Day 13 arrived like a death sentence. Aria had $4,700. She had 1 day left. She met Douglas in a parking garage at 3 in the morning, the concrete echoing with every breath, every footstep. She handed him the cash with hands that would not stop shaking. Douglas counted it slowly, deliberately, making her wait for the verdict. Not enough. You have 24 hours to find the rest or I move her. She disappears into my international network. You will never see her again. You will spend the rest of your life wondering if she is alive. Aria collapsed to her knees on the cold asphalt. I have nothing left. I sold everything. I worked until I could not stand. Please. Douglas kicked the money back at her. The bill scattered like leaves in the wind. Then maybe you should have stolen from Castellano. His mansion is filled with millions. You have access to everything. He drove away, leaving her alone in the dark. Aria sat there for a long time, holding the worn prayer card her grandmother had given her, the only thing she had not sold, could not sell, because it was the last thread connecting her to the only person who had ever truly loved her. The prayer was faded now, the words almost illegible. She whispered them anyway. And in that moment, surrounded by the sound of distant traffic and the pounding of her own failing heart, Aria made a choice. She would tell Nicholas everything. She would accept whatever came, death, imprisonment, abandonment, because Emma's life was worth more than her own. Some prices were paid in heartbreak. Some debts were paid in truth. She did not know that Nicholas Castellano had already assembled the pieces of her puzzle. he did not know that 3 floors below Diana Whitfield's bedroom, a man who ruled Las Vegas with an iron fist was about to make a choice that would cost him everything: his empire, his reputation, his carefully constructed code, and that this choice would be made not for an empire, but for a 6-year-old girl with gap-toothed smile and a nanny with eyes like autumn leaves. What was about to happen would change all of them forever. At 2:24 in the morning, the warehouse district of Las Vegas was a graveyard of rusted metal and broken glass. Aria Harper's breath came in ragged clouds as she ran beside Nicholas Castellano, her small frame dwarfed by the 12 men in tactical black who moved like shadows through the darkness. The sound of their boots on concrete echoed off the metal walls, a percussion of purpose, of justice finally arriving. Nicholas moved with the controlled precision of a man who had planned this moment for years. 6'2", built like a monument to violence, his dark eyes burning with a fury that made even his most loyal soldiers step carefully around him. The scar running from his right temple to his cheekbone seemed deeper in the warehouse light, carved there by 15 years of ruling a city that belonged to him alone. He carried a Glock 9mm with the casual ease of someone who had used it more times than he had slept. Aria had never seen him like this. Not the careful mafia boss who counted money in climate-controlled penthouse rooms. This was something else. This was a man who had decided the cost of mercy was worth the collapse of everything he had built. The warehouse loomed ahead, a rectangular structure of corrugated steel that squatted on the edge of the industrial district like a predator waiting. Inside, through the high windows, they could see lights. Movement. A child's crying that carried even through the metal walls. Nicholas raised his hand. The 12 men stopped instantly, formation tightening. He turned to look at Aria, and she saw something shift behind his eyes. A calculation. A moment of doubt that lasted less than a second before hardening into absolute certainty. "Stay behind me," he said, and his voice was like thunder wrapped in ice. "When we breach, you run directly to Emma. Do not look at anything else. Do not listen to anything Douglas says. You find her, you cut the restraints, you bring her out. Rocco will cover you." Rocco stepped forward, a man in his 50s with grey threading through his dark hair and the kind of scars that told stories of loyalty measured in blood. He nodded at Aria without speaking. That was all the reassurance she would get. Aria's hand trembled as she pulled the worn prayer card from her jacket pocket. The one her grandmother had given her when she was 7 years old. The one that had survived every moment of her unraveling life. She whispered the prayer silently, the words faded almost to nothing on the cardstock. Then she tucked it back against her heart and looked at Nicholas. "I am ready," she said. Nicholas studied her for 3 long seconds. This woman who had kept Emma's kidnapping secret to save the child's life. Who had worked herself until her hands bled, until her ribs showed through her skin, until the foreclosure notice became more real than hope. Who had been willing to die on that cold asphalt rather than let Emma disappear into Douglas Hale's network. He had made his choice the moment she told him the truth in his study. The moment she pressed that worn prayer card into his hand like it was the most valuable thing in the world. His empire would break before he let that child be taken. "Then let us end this," he said. The breach was violence delivered with precision. The warehouse door exploded inward, and the 12 men poured through like a dark tide. Aria heard gunfire immediately, controlled, professional, over before it truly began. The guards Douglas had stationed at the entrance went down without firing a shot. They had been trained for small crimes, not for men trained to bring down entire organizations. The warehouse interior opened up like a tomb. Shipping containers stacked 3 high. Pallets of goods that were not goods at all. The smell hit Aria first: human sweat, fear, urine, the stench of desperation that accumulated in spaces where people were held against their will. Emma stood in the center of the warehouse floor, cable tied to a metal chair, her small body shaking violently. She was wearing the pink dress she had put on the morning Diana Whitfield took her. The same dress, now filthy, now torn at the collar. Her face was streaked with tears, her mouth open in a scream that no sound was coming from anymore. She had cried herself silent. Douglas Hale stood next to her. The male villain was 58 years old, built like a man who had never known honest work. His face was bloated from alcohol and satisfaction, his tailored suit worth more than 3 months of Aria's old salary. He had the soft hands of someone who let other people do violence for him. There were 4 armed guards positioned around him, and every single one of them was raising their weapons as Nicholas's men moved into formation. But Nicholas was faster. His first shot came from the hip, casual as breathing. Douglas's hand exploded. The gun he was reaching for clattered to the concrete. Douglas screamed, a sound like an animal caught in a trap, and crumpled forward, cradling his ruined hand. Blood sprayed across the pristine concrete in an arc that looked almost artistic. "Nobody move," Nicholas said, and his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Hands where I can see them." Douglas's 4 guards made the choice to surrender. Smart men, choosing to live another day. They dropped their weapons and fell to their knees with their hands interlocked behind their heads. Rocco and Nino secured them in seconds, zip-tied their wrists, moved them to the far corner of the warehouse. Aria was already moving. She ran toward Emma without waiting for permission, Rocco covering her flank, his weapon trained on Douglas in case the trafficker tried something desperate. She fell to her knees in front of the chair and Emma's eyes locked onto hers. "Baby, it is me," Aria whispered. "It is Vivi. I am here. I am here and you are safe." Emma's voice came out raw and destroyed. "You came back. I knew you would come back." Aria's hand shook as she found the cable ties binding the child to the chair. Plastic restraints, fastened tight enough to leave red marks on Emma's wrists. She pulled out a knife Rocco had given her and sawed through the ties. They snapped apart and Emma fell forward into Aria's arms, her small body racked with sobs that came from some wounded place too deep for healing. Aria held her. She held her and cried and whispered promises into her hair, that she would never be left again, that nobody would take her, that this was the end of the darkness. Nicholas stood over Douglas Hale, who was bleeding onto the warehouse floor and sobbing with the sound of a man whose world had collapsed in seconds. "You built a network on the backs of children," Nicholas said quietly. 93 documented victims across 4 states. "You bought and sold human beings like inventory. And you were so certain of your power that you touched someone under my protection." Douglas gasped, I did not know she worked for you." "You knew she was desperate," Nicholas said. "You knew she was alone. You knew she had nothing to offer but compliance. That was exactly why you chose her." Nicholas pulled out his phone and dialed. When the operator answered, he spoke with the flat tone of a man ordering dinner, FBI field office. "This is Nicholas Castellano. I have Douglas Hale gift wrapped for you. Warehouse 7, on Industrial Avenue East. 12 bound victims and 47 kilos of documentation proving his entire operation. You will find his financial records on the server in his office. They will lead you to 89 co-conspirators, including a socialite named Diana Whitfield. She has been ordering children for 10 years. You have everything you need to dismantle him completely." He hung up without waiting for a response. The ambulance arrived at 3:15 a.m. The FBI followed at 3:22 a.m. By the time the sun rose over the Nevada desert, Douglas Hale's empire was in pieces. Meanwhile, 60 blocks away in a penthouse on the Strip, Diana Whitfield slept the sleep of the profoundly wicked. She did not know that every phone call she had made to Douglas Hale had been recorded. That Nicholas's financial investigators had traced $200,000 payments from her accounts to Douglas's operation across 6 years. That her own housekeeper had documented 17 conversations where Diana discussed purchasing children specifically for wealthy clients who wanted girls between the ages of 5 and 8. She did not know that her life was over. The pounding on her penthouse door came at 6:38 a.m. 6 federal agents with a warrant and the kind of cold certainty that comes from building an airtight case. Diana answered the door in her silk robe, her face still beautiful but empty of the humanity that should have lived behind her eyes. "Diana Whitfield," the lead agent said, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit human trafficking, child endangerment, and 23 counts of child sexual exploitation." Diana's carefully constructed mask shattered. She tried to run. She tried to call her lawyer. She tried to explain that she was a victim of circumstance, that Douglas had manipulated her, that she had only been trying to help wealthy men find companionship. But the evidence was overwhelming: photographs, financial records, testimony from victims who identified her voice on recordings as the woman who had negotiated their prices. The trial lasted 5 days. 12 women sat in the witness stand and described how Diana Whitfield had selected them. How she had evaluated them like cattle at market. How she had negotiated the payments with a precision that suggested this was simply another business transaction in her carefully curated life. The judge's voice delivered the sentence at 4:33 p.m. on a Tuesday: 40 years federal prison without possibility of parole. Diana collapsed in the courtroom. She was led away in handcuffs, cameras flashing, her face finally matching the corruption that lived beneath her skin. Douglas Hale received 63 years. His network, 23 locations across 4 states, 106 documented victims, was dismantled completely. Every connection traced. Every conspirator arrested. Every location shuttered. Emma was placed with a trauma counselor. Aria sat beside her through every appointment, holding her hand, whispering that she would never leave. That some people stayed. That the storm had passed and the sky was finally clearing. 3 weeks later, Emma called Aria a mommy for the first time. Aria broke down crying so completely that she had to leave the room. Family is not always bound by blood but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. 3 weeks after the federal agents led Diana Whitfield away in handcuffs, Aria sat in Nicholas Castellano's study at dawn, watching the Las Vegas sun paint the marble walls in shades of gold and rose. The room smelled like leather and old mahogany, like power that had learned to be patient. Emma slept upstairs in a bedroom Nicholas had prepared: pale yellow walls, shelves lined with books Emma actually wanted, toys scattered across soft carpet instead of arranged by a woman who viewed her daughter as inventory. Nicholas entered carrying an envelope. He did not speak. He simply placed it on the desk between them, and Aria felt her breath catch before she even opened it. $125,000. The number was written in black ink, precise and impossible. Below it, a single line: foreclosure notice, cancelled. Aria's hands trembled as she held the papers. The kitchen clock ticked somewhere in the mansion. Rain fell against the windows, soft and steady, washing the October cold away. She looked at Nicholas. "I cannot take this." His eyes, dark as a storm, did not waver. "You earned it. Every dollar. You saved Emma's life. You saved mine twice, once when you pressed your hand to my wound instead of running, and once when you chose to believe the truth instead of accepting the easiest lie." Aria shook her head, tears already forming. "Why would you help me? I am nobody. I counted $78 by lamplight 3 weeks ago like it was a fortune because to me it was everything. I am a nanny who lives in a closet and disappears when the family sits down to eat. I am the person nobody remembers after I leave the room." Nicholas rose from his chair and walked to the window. For a long moment, he did not turn around. His shoulders were broad beneath the white silk shirt, the kind of shirt that cost more than she earned in 2 months. When he finally spoke, his voice was like something breaking, controlled, precise, but breaking nonetheless. "I grew up in a one-room apartment in the worst part of this city. My father was a violent man who believed a child's bones were meant to be broken. My mother worked 3 jobs and still came home to bruises. I was 12 years old when I fought back hard enough that he never touched us again. Then I clawed my way out of that world and swore that no child would ever suffer the way we suffered. When you knelt beside me bleeding and pressed your hand to my wound instead of running, I saw something I have not seen in 20 years. I saw someone who understood damage. Who understood survival. Who understood that some people stay when everyone else runs." He turned to face her. The scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone caught the light. His expression was unguarded in a way that made him look decades younger, like the boy underneath the crime boss was finally surfacing. "You are not nobody, Aria Harper. You are the person who risked everything for a child who was not even yours. You are the person who chose to stay when silence would have been safer. You are the only woman I have ever trusted with my life, and you did not earn that trust through obedience or fear. You earned it through courage. So take the house. Take the money. Take everything Diana Whitfield tried to deny you." From the doorway, Rocco and Nino exchanged a look neither had seen on the other's face in 15 years, shock. In all their years working for Nicholas Castellano, they had never heard him speak like this. They had never seen him unguarded. Nino's jaw tightened slightly. Rocco's hand moved unconsciously to his chest, over his heart, the way a man moves when something profound has shifted inside him. Aria stood from the chair. "What happens now?" Nicholas moved toward her, and the room seemed to contract, seemed to hold its breath. "Emma needs someone who loves her. You. More than that, she needs to believe that when she says the word stay, the person she asks will not disappear. Aria, I am asking you to stay. Not as an employee. Not on a contract. As family. Emma needs you. I need you. And you, Aria? Do you need me to rescue you?" The question hung between them. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the mansion like a heartbeat. Aria thought of the foreclosure notice, of the $78, of the night she had watched Emma's mother orchestrate her own daughter's destruction. She thought of kneeling beside Nicholas in the dark, her hand pressed to his wound, and the way his fingers had closed around hers like she was the only real thing in a world built on lies. "You already rescued me," she said quietly. "The night you knelt beside me covered in my blood, something changed inside you. I have spent my whole life trusting no one, and then you appeared and chose to stay. Let me return the favor. Let me stay. Not because I owe you. Because I choose to." Aria reached across the desk and took his hand. His fingers were long, scarred, built for violence but now trembling slightly in hers. Their hands intertwined, both scarred, both damaged, both carrying the map of survival written on their skin. The study door burst open. Emma ran in wearing an oversized shirt that belonged to Nicholas, her hair tangled from sleep. "Ari, are you making breakfast? I am so hungry I could eat the entire kitchen." Aria pulled her hand back, wiping her eyes quickly. She smiled at the child. "Yes, sweetheart. I am making breakfast." Emma climbed into Aria's lap and wrapped her arms around her neck so tightly that Aria felt the pressure against her heart. She rested her chin on the top of Emma's head. "I love you, Ari." The words were simple. They were everything. Nicholas watched them from across the room, the nanny and the child who had both been abandoned by the world, now bound together by choice rather than circumstance. His expression softened in a way his men had never witnessed. For a moment, he looked like someone who had finally come home. 6 months later, Aria and Emma sat in the sunlit kitchen of the mansion. The marble coldness had transformed into warmth. Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator, drawings of the three of them, stick figures holding hands beneath a bright sun. Laughter lived in this room now. So did the smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon bread baking in the oven. Nicholas entered from his study, and Emma's head snapped up immediately. "Papa Nick! When did you get home?" The word Papa stopped Aria's breath. She watched as Nicholas crossed the room and lifted Emma into his arms naturally, easily, like he had been doing it for years instead of months. "Just now, little one. Did you finish your homework?" Emma nodded with exaggerated enthusiasm. Nicholas set her down and she ran back to her coloring books. He turned to Aria, and something vulnerable passed between them, a question and an answer. "She called you Papa. Is that all right?" Aria stepped closer. "It is perfect." They stood in the kitchen together, the crime boss, the nanny, and the child. Aria touched the worn prayer card in her pocket, the one her grandmother had given her, the one she had carried through every dark night. "You taught me that family is not about blood, grandmother." "You were right." Nicholas wrapped his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "I have made many choices in my life, Aria. Most of them violent. Most of them designed to hurt people and protect myself. But the choice to follow you that October night, to believe in you instead of my suspicions, that was the choice that saved me. That was the choice that brought me home. You saved me too. That night I was ready to give up everything. I was going to disappear. You showed me I was worth saving. Emma called from the living room, her voice bright and certain. Ari. Papa Nick. Come play. They exchanged one final look, two people broken by the world, made whole by choosing each other. As they walked toward Emma's laughter, Nicholas spoke the words that had become their truth, their foundation, their answer to every question about what family means. Family is not always bound by blood but by those who choose to stay when the storm arrives. If this story moved you, drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Subscribe because tomorrow we are bringing you another story about love, redemption, and the families we choose. Drop a comment and tell us, what would you have done in Aria's position? Would you have kept silent to save Emma or told the truth and risked everything? The best comment gets pinned. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow.